Hi folks, I'm Joel. Today we're going to be looking at, again, Next.js with a headless CMS, but with a focus on personalization. We're going to show two techniques for achieving personalization. One is using middleware to look at either a header, which is in this case is going to be a region header. You can also look at a cookie header, but we're going to, based on the region, route the user to a different page, even though the URL in their browser is going to stay the same. So we did that for regionalized personalization, which actually we do that on our own site, on a homepage. And then we're also going to show something called partial pre-rendering in Next.js to do personalization right in the middle of a page or with an entire route to make it more dynamic experience for your customers while still delivering a really fast, responsive, and really quick time to first byte loading screen that you can have there when you're waiting for that data to load around the static rest of the page. So let's jump right into the code. Okay, for the first example, I'm actually going to show you the agilitycms.com website because we just implemented regionalized personalization for folks who are in Canada. So we wanted to have a different homepage for folks who are in Canada. And we could do this for other countries as well, but Canada was the first one because we're Canadian and we kind of like to show off Canadian stuff. So we wanted to speak to people that are coming from Canada directly. So we've got our main homepage right here, which is a regular homepage at /home, but then there's another page at /home/home-Canada that actually has a Canadian homepage. So if I actually go to the website right now, and if I just go to agilitycms.com, I can see, hey, this is the Canadian homepage. There's a Canadian flag there. This is Canadian. If I actually go to /home, then I see the regular for everyone else in the world version of this homepage. How did we do that? How did we make sure that even though the page is the same, the URL is the same, if I come from different spots, it's going to be different. And I can't show, I guess I could have a VM that's pulling from a different location, or I could spoof that somehow. But let's just actually look at the code real quick to see how this is working. All right, so I'm in the agilitycms.com. This is the actual code for the website. It's in Next.js, and this code is available. I'll share the link to this repo so you can see it. So I'm in my middleware, and there's a whole bunch of stuff going on in the middleware. But down at the bottom, we actually check the path name and say, hey, look, if the path is just slash, so if you're on the homepage and request.geo, so this is something that's implemented as part of middleware, as part of the middleware spec, to say, hey, what country are you from? And there's a few other regional things you can get from here too to get different. You can get like a city as well, potentially, but the country is the most valuable, I think, in this case. So if the country equals CA, which is the country code for Canada, then we're actually going to change the URL to /home/home-Canada, all right? And then we're gonna do what's called a rewrite. So we're going to basically tell Next.js to say, hey, look, the URL in the user's browser is just slash. It's a homepage. But we want you to render the Canada homepage in this instead. And what's really cool is all the regular static rendering rules and all the caching, all that stuff works. But the user's just going to see a different version of the homepage for that. So that's all the code that we had to do, which is this like 10 lines of code here to implement that really, really simple piece of personalization. So that's personalization, sort of the first kind, all right? Let's dig into something that's a little more interesting. And so we're going to look at this example. Let's just close all these things here, and we'll just kind of take you on a little tour through this project where what we're going to show here is the idea that if I'm logged in, I'm going to see something different, okay? So let's go to the actual homepage here. I'm going to sign out. And so by default, I've got this little thing here saying, hey, there's no session. This is probably not the nicest variable. I just wanted to show something to say, hey, we have nothing, and this is going to render the same for everybody because I'm not logged in, right? Everything else here, this is just our regular starter site. It's totally rendering static, okay? But when I sign in now, and we can just sign in with Google here, super basic, it's actually going to go in and pull some content. And now this content is stored actually in Agility, but normally your personalized content is going to be in like another database or somewhere. It could be in your headless CMS. It could be anywhere. But we're going to pull that in dynamically for this user. So the whole site is not personalized except for this one section. And you can see there was actually a bit of a loading screen that I showed there. And I've got like a sleep timer there to make it really obvious that that's loading. All right. So first of all, let's actually just look at where that content's coming from. So back into Agility here, we've got our, excuse me, we've got a content list called member stats. And all that's doing is I've got this little tyke that's linked to my email address. So this is actually my Gmail, so I can do a quick login with gmail.com. So this is my email. So when joelvardy@gmail.com logs in, it's going to pull this content item in, and it's not going to cache it. It's going to pull it in dynamically. Every page loads so that I can get the updated score. I could do some kind of caching if I wanted to, but in this example, I don't want to do any caching because I want to show how dynamic we can be here, okay? So let's actually look at the code for how that's implemented. So in it, the first thing that we set up here is in the next config, we've turned on an experimental feature called partial pre-rendering, okay? And we're going to use incremental adoption for this, all right? So this is a fairly new feature. I'm assuming that the Next.js team will bring this to production soon, or soon-ish, but it's a cool one to kind of learn how it works in the meantime. And if you didn't want to use an experimental version of this, you could just use straight up server-side rendering. But the cool thing with partial pre-rendering is everything around my dynamic stuff is going to be statically rendered. So it's going to be really fast, and I don't have to hit my data sources for that very often. It's going to be really high performing. We're only going to dynamically render the one piece in there, and we're still going to get really first time to first byte because it's going to stream that down, okay? The thing that gets streamed down first is there was that loading screen. So that all comes down statically. And then we it'll stream in the updated version of that stuff. So that's all taken care of for you using something called suspense. So let's look at that component, and it's called the members banner. And I've split it up into a few different components so we can see what's happening. So the main members banner component is right here, and it's just a suspense component that says, hey, the fallback is the members skeleton. So if I just flip back here, if you'll see this gray, that's the skeleton, okay? So it doesn't have any personalized information in there, but it means that the page doesn't jump very much. And I didn't do a great job because it does jump a little bit. But that's the idea, is you would make that kind of loading component so your screen's not going to jump. And then we've got this members banner dynamic that we're loading. And in this case, all we're doing is we're getting the session from our Nextauth. So this is actually a really good example of using Nextauth. So I'll share a link to this repo as well in the description. So Nextauth is what we use. I think I showed an example with Auth0 in one of the previous videos. This is using Nextauth, which is a different authentication library that allows you to integrate with a bunch of different identity providers. So it's really cool. So that really works nicely with Nextjs as well. Highly recommend checking that out. So we're going to get the server session from there. And then if we don't have any session, that's where we get this, hey, no session. You could probably just return null here so that we don't have anything if the person's logged out. That might be a little cleaner than showing that no session, but I just wanted to be completely clear what's happening there. Now we're going to actually get the dynamic data. In this case, our dynamic data is going to come from Agility CMS itself. And I've got something specifically saying, hey, don't cache this call at all from Agility, okay? And then we're going to grab that member stats list. We're going to look up the member data based on the user's email. So this is, remember we had joelvardy@gmail.com was in there. So we're going to go do a lookup to that list based on that filter. We only want one item from there, okay? And then we're going to grab some fields from there. We're going to grab the picture, the player name, and the last game score, okay? So just some data that we're getting. This data might have been in a database. It could be anywhere. We're just going to get some dynamic data. And here we've got my sleep timer. This is just a hack to wait for 1 second so we can see the skeleton for a little bit. If this call took a long time, so if I was hitting a database that actually was slower or there was network latency, then that's okay because we're going to see that skeleton for a second or however long it takes that call to happen, and then we'll see the actual data. So that's where a lot of apps you've seen the kind of loading screens for. This is what's happening with that. And then we just output the data like we normally would, which is just totally regular stuff that's here, okay? So let's review that one more time, actually see what's happening here. So I'm going to refresh this. You can see we've got we see that loading screen, and we still get the loading thing up here. So this is all streaming down in one single request to come into this screen. So that's a really nice way of doing that. And of course, if I change the content in Agility, so if I change this to say, hey, they lost 8 to 9, boo, really sad. Let's save that. That's gonna come down immediately the next time we refresh this, okay? So we'll refresh this here and we can see, so there you go. Now you get the message lost 8 to 9. So that's updated really fast, okay? So that's how we've done it. So we've embedded, this is embedding a personalized section right inside the site. There's another technique with partial pre-rendering that might work better for you depending on your situation, is if you wanted to have a whole members area, a whole portion of the site where everything's logged in. You can do that as well. And then you don't need to use a suspense component. You can use what's called the loading screen. All right, so I'll just show you that real quick as well. So under our app folder, we've got everything by default from Agility is coming from this main slug route. Okay, so we've got that set up here, but I can also do my own routes. And so you can see we've got the sign-in route that was set up, but we've also got this members route with the page in it. So that's the page that I'm seeing right here, right? So that's just a regular sort of hard-coded route in the system, and a lot of more of the Next.js examples I'll have that. I could make this dynamic based on a members folder inside my CMS as well. I could do that as well, but in this case, we just wanted to essentially pull down the same thing and show the exact same call. So this is a non-cached call coming into Agility, filtering on the user's email, pulling out the that one stat, and pulling all that down in. Okay. So really basic stuff, and we're actually rendering out the local time here, just so we can see that it's actually rendering every time we load this. Okay, so that's pulling the same dynamic data in, but then we've also got this loading.tsx. So what this does is behind the scenes, I don't have to set up my the suspense component that I had wrapped in with the members banner that I had shown earlier. This case, Next.js is going to take care of this for you. And I will say, if you have a loading screen anywhere, like if I put a loading screen over in this main slug, that will work. You basically have just turned it into a dynamic page when you've done that. And one of the interesting things that happens when you do that is 404s don't come out as 404s because it's going to start streaming immediately. So even if you get a page not found, it's going to come down as a 200 output. So that's one of the really interesting things to remember about that. You want to use this loading screen judiciously. Partial pre-rendering is still an experimental feature, but it works really, really well when you want to show personalization. So I hope that's given you a little bit of an example of how to do that, how to do some authentication with NextAuth, and we can do personalization at the middleware level as well as at the component and the page level within Next.js. Really cool way to work with Headless CMS and Next.js. Thanks for watching.